So welcome to another tool review video. In this video, I'm reviewing the Vevor LED work light with stand, which is right here. I'll show the bits and pieces of it a little bit later in the video. I genuinely don't do unboxing of these things because I find watching that rather dull. But this came in one piece. The build quality is par for the course. And so far I've had pretty good success with it. The way I got my hands on this was a little bit of a happy accident. I had worked with Vevor before. Most recently, if you watch the channel, you know I got a set of linear actuators with them to make a standing desk. And as winter was coming along, I've been seeing a lot of videos about diesel heaters, and I actually went on Amazon to buy one, and I noticed that this company makes one. So I tried my luck because they have asked me to review a couple other products, but in general, I only do stuff related to woodworking on the channel. So a lot of companies will reach out to me asking to review a multitude of products, but I really stick to only reviewing stuff I would use in the shop. And so we had been communicating since the last thing I worked on. So on a whim, I asked them if I could have a diesel heater, and they said sure, and asked if I wanted this light as well. I wasn't going to refuse. Honestly, my first thought was now I could play cornhole after dark because there's no floodlights in the backyard. But I've actually been finding some pretty useful things for it in the shop. The diesel heater is actually behind me. This video will be coming out soon as well. I was hoping to have it up much earlier than this, but we've been having, in my opinion, probably the warmest winter in easily the past 10 years. So I just haven't had to run it a lot. But I will have that video coming out because it has been cold enough. We had a big cold snap around the holidays as well, which I was using it all day long. So that's basically what this video is going to be. It's a little bit shorter because it is only a light. I can only think of so many spectacular things I could do with it. But with all of these tool reviews, but especially stuff like this, which I consider somewhat of a consumable, anything with batteries is going to be like that, or anything that uses electricity will be like that. I will keep you updated on how well it's working. I do try and do that with all of the videos. I will go back and pin a comment to the top of the reviews stating whether or not I still have the tool, so I do keep that up to date. So as I said in the intro, this was the light I was working. It was about an 800 lumen light. It was working well. I got it out of the trash, so it was free, but I knocked it over and broke the bulb. So the timing of getting this light was just about perfect because the light they sent me is 20,000 lumens versus the 800 lumens of this one, so obviously it's much brighter. And the color temp, the Kelvin temp for the new light is 5,000, which is about mid-range, so it's not a super harsh light. Sometimes the heavier LED lights hurt my eyes, but as you can see, it's an adjustable stand that goes from about 27 inches to 68 inches, and you could take this top part off, and then all of this stuff swivels, so it's very versatile. I've actually been using just the top of it on the table saw top, which works great. It wobbles a little bit, but that's to be expected with a single pole stand like this, and this is rated as waterproof, but I have no plans to figure out if that's true or not. It also comes with a long extension cord, but also an additional extension cord, which is nice. So for this video, I wanted to try out better lighting in the shop with this tabletop. I have this really pretty oak desk tabletop. You can see the quarter sawn oak on the top with the rays showing, but the problem is, as sturdy as it looks, it actually rocks back and forth terribly. So I thought this would be a quick, easy project to have lit. Obviously you could see turning on the light. This isn't rocket science. It's going to be brighter using a light in the shop. I could fix the problem. So the top of this comes off. It has these very, very deep aprons, and the whole piece is extremely heavy, but you could see just how badly those legs are rocking back and forth. And it was interesting because when I took this off, they had hand-carved pocket hole screws in the side. And then I went through and removed, just to kind of see how they built these legs themselves, because they are hollow. They're just attached with screws. So this is not how I would necessarily build, but this table has pretty much withstood the test of time, except for the the attachments of the two pedestals. You can see they use some nice joinery getting these together. They're still pretty square, and that's just having this plank on top, which is how the table's attached to the legs. But this is where the problem arises. You would think that this bottom rail here would be attached with a mortise and tenon, but it's not. You can see once I could actually get this apart that the only thing in place holding this is a cleat, and that's why it rocks so much. And all of these pieces are solid oak, so this is a very heavy table, and the fact that it's only held together with a couple screws like this, after taking it apart to move it and whatnot, it's just become too compromised. Now this is what I use for my computer desk, and it's annoying sitting there all day typing, and it's rocking back and forth. So this has been onto the to-do list for a while. So my goal was to fix this as quickly as possible, not necessarily as aesthetically pleasing as possible. You can see, like I said, I have this light set up on the table saw. My table saw kind of doubles as a workbench, unfortunately, because I have so much stuff in the shop at the moment, and my workbench table is kind of turned into my laser table at the moment. So it's nice to be able to prop that light up on the table. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to create what I think should have been done in the first place, which is I'm going to put some tenons in the bottom of this piece. I'm going to add some long stretchers that are going to double as I'm going to add some mortises in the bottom of this table, and I'm going to add some long pieces of scrap I have laying around the shop, which are going to act as tenons to hopefully tie this whole thing together. So I'm just using a 3/4 inch spade bit to drill these holes. They don't have to be exactly perfect because it's a little undersized for what I'm doing. And then I could take a chisel and square these up. Obviously I have these pre-marked based on the thickness of material I had laying around the shop. I really only had scrap to work with this piece. I could just square up the corners and get these through mortises. In hindsight, this would have been smarter to clamp a piece of scrap underneath of this so I didn't get any blowout on the bottom, but none of this will ever be seen. And then this is just it's a little thicker than 3/4 inch by about 3.5 inch wide pine I had laying around the shop. You could see how now I'm going to be able to tie those two pieces together. But because the inside of this foot is hollow, there's about a 5/8 inch space between that and where I'm going to want to mount these pieces. So I happen to have some furring strips laying around the shop, which is terrible lumber, but for something like this I could screw it down and take the bow out of it, and then those pieces I just cut will be able to sit on top of this, and I could screw everything together. So now I could just slide these pieces into place. I obviously put the mortises on both legs, and the reference for where I put those was basically where the cleat was. And I had two pieces, so I cut two mortises instead of one big one, which will help with not compromising the bottom of this piece of wood as well. And then this piece, this long rail across the bottom can just sit right on top of that. And that was the basic fix I had for this. Like I said, it's not the way I would have built this in the first place. It's not the nicest fix, but it's one of those things where I knew you were never going to see it. I wanted to get it done pretty quickly, so that is how I decided to do it. I put some pipe clamps in place, and the other thing is this table's kind of short. It's a little under 29 inches, and I wanted it a little taller. So to kill two birds with one stone, I took some more of this furring strip material, and this is basically going to act as a spacer for the top. It's going to raise it up about another 3/4 inch, but it will also tie this base together. Part of the problem with this table is because this top is so wobbly without the top on, the base is so wobbly without the top on it. You can't really move it with the top on it. It's too heavy for one person. Getting around corners, it's quite a big table. So by adding those runners on the top, it avoids that problem. You could also see on the bottom, I only measured for the thickness of this wood going into one side. So that happens a lot in this shop. My runners were a little short, so I might go back eventually and make those a little bit longer, but it will work for this. I screwed everything together instead of gluing it together because I didn't know if I would have to take it apart to bring it upstairs. But like I said, it's a quick fix. And then as you can see, once it's all assembled together, it no longer rocks. And unless you're bending down and looking at the underside of the table, you can't see any of the repairs. So I was pretty happy with this. Like I said, this took a couple hours in the afternoon and I was back up and running. And using the light all day, one of the nicest parts is you can touch it, and of course it's going to be warm, but it's not going to burn you. The older style lights of these, they got really hot as you were working on them, and for someone like me who's a little clumsy and always knocking down stuff in the shop, that is nice. To showcase another thing I'm going to use this for, here's a piece of MDF that I scratched up without the lights on, and as soon as you turn the lights on, you could see the reflected light is going to pick up those scratch marks much easier with a high intensity light on them versus just daylight or overhead lights. There's been many a times in my, especially my older shop, which was darker, where I was working on a piece and it looked great, and then when I went to go bring it outside to transfer it to a customer's house, all of a sudden I noticed all these little scratches on the surface. Now granted, that was okay in a sense because all this furniture is going inside someone's house where it's going to be darker than the outside with natural light. But you can see just how nice it's going to be able to shine a light on a finished piece and remove those scratches much easier. The basic way sanding works is you're creating scratches on the surface to smooth it out. And as you go up in the grade of sandpaper from say 40 to 300, those scratches become finer and finer, and they remove the previous scratches, which will then give you the smooth surface. But as you can see, that light is going to pick up scratches, especially if you sand across the grain, which I do sometimes by accident, especially with a belt sander. That light will pick up those scratches because as the light hits the deeper crevices of the scratches, it creates more of a shadow, and that's how you see it. So shining a high intensity light on a surface that you want extremely smooth will help with this, which is why paint booths are so bright. So I used this when I was especially putting finish on as well, because you could see where the finish is going, especially for something like this where I already had finish on it. So applying a second coat, you don't really see it as much, and I apologize, I didn't realize at the time how much my camera was shaking when I was putting this on because this tabletop wasn't attached. But this is going to be useful for not only sanding, but applying finish as well, because you could see, especially when I get to the walnut, it really helps you see, depending on where you have the light, the parts you've previously been working on to get a nice finish. So I'll have some codes and whatnot in the comment section if you're interested in a light like this. As with all of these products, I usually don't have affiliate links for these. If I do, I mention that. So if you're not in the market for a light, don't buy a light. I'm not getting any money from this. The only thing I got from making this video was the free light myself.